Presentation is from myself, Stephen Collinson, Business Development Director at a company called Ryhurst, and Alistair Rose, who'll be speaking shortly, who's the Project Director for Lancashire Care Foundation Trust. Ryhurst are an investor, developer working only in the health sector, and we've developed something like 60 projects over the last few years. And Lancashire Care are one of the largest mental health and now community services providers in the country. And together we formed the first joint venture partnership covering estates services, whole estate services in the NHS. Now these challenges will be familiar to all of you, I guess. The NHS is facing a really unprecedented period. I used to be an NHS chief executive. I don't remember a time at which we were asked to find savings of the order of £20 billion by 2014. The restructuring that's gone on within the NHS and continues to do so with the uncertainty around the progress of the bill, continued creation of foundation trusts, an estate which really doesn't often meet service requirements for organisations going forward, and continued limited access to capital and revenue funding, of course, together with a profile of users which is changing, the age profile, the dependency profile, the shift to care outside of hospital, all of which means the challenge facing the NHS is absolutely enormous. We don't come in as a consultant, we don't come in as someone who outsources services. What we do is seek to create a partnership with the NHS Trust in the form of a new company which can then take forward solutions to meet this range of challenges. There's a number of possible solutions to the way in which you can meet those challenges. You'll be familiar with many of them. First of all, if you're trying to raise cash quickly, what do? You might look for short-term gain, you might look to sell your surplus assets. Now, people say to us, well, we don't have any surplus assets. Actually, you do. The NHS probably has something like 23% of its estate, which is either surplus or unfit for purpose, and indeed there's more surplus estate in the NHS than Tesco have as estate in the whole of this country. And so there is potential for short-term gain should you choose to go down that road. The NHS has an estate worth something like £40 billion. And so there is potential there. However, short-term gain doesn't bring you long-term revenue solutions, which is the primary difficulty that most NHS organisations will be facing. You can look for medium-term gain, which is rationalising the estate, looking again at how you use the estate in developing new models of care, how you use the estate in terms of space utilisation, lean management, being agile in the sense of the way in which you room share and the way in which you can find future uses for buildings that in the past occupied a particular style of development. And again, that will bring gain. It will bring some surplus in terms of cash, and it will bring some revenue solutions. Now, you'll find plenty of people who can talk to you about both of those opportunities, and that isn't us, really. You'll find organisations, E.C. Harris, Balfour Beatty, lots of others, who will have those conversations with you. But what we think is a much better, more productive, and longer-term benefit to both of us would be to create the sort of joint venture we have with Lancashire. And increasingly, this is being a model which is being adopted throughout the NHS. We're seeing in the last 2 weeks, for example, 4 ODU notices of this type. We must have something like 50 organisations that we've been talking to who are expressing interest in creating a joint venture partnership to manage their estate. And that brings long-term gain. What is that solution? Our primary aim, first of all, is to make whatever we do affordable. And that means reducing your cost base. It means reducing your revenue cost base as well as bringing capital gain. It means finding ways in which we can introduce either partners or better ways of working so that you consistently spend less than you do now in managing your estate. It means us finding ways between us of incentivising each other as a partnership so that we can both gain from that exercise. It means finding commercial solutions, whether it is about VAT efficiency, whether it's about construction cost on new build, or whether it's about estates and facilities management revenue costs that will bring savings to you. Not, as I said before, as a consultant. It's not what we're about. We will take that risk from you, we will guarantee you those benefits, and we will put people in, if that's necessary, to manage services alongside you. We create a company between us that forms the opportunity for delivering those services, and that company can have a series, if necessary, of subsidiary companies, which I'll show you in a moment, which can take responsibility for different aspects of your needs. It might be a capital project, it might be an estate service, it might be a property disposal opportunity, it might be some commercial opportunities. But we create something with you that's 50-50 owned, so we both gain, we both bear the risk. If it works, we both get something from it, and we show you very transparently what we get from it, and we agree with you an incentivization program so you keep the majority of those savings. It's a flexible solution because we don't insist on bringing our own supply chain, and we don't insist on it being an exclusive relationship. Again, many of the people that you will talk to will say to you, yes, we can bring you in our contractors, our builders, we can bring you our estates management team, we can bring you our equipment supply team or whatever. We don't do that. We work with you to create the partnership. Once the partnership is created, that partnership decides who it needs to buy services from. So we don't have any fixed chain, and if you don't like what we're doing, or if you find a way in which you can realise cash through other routes, you can do that as well. There's no exclusivity in this at all. And so we're working with Lancashire at the moment, and you'll hear Alistair talk about other opportunities they will pursue without us. And we're down to 2 at the moment on another bid where there are other players in that game as well that we will have to work alongside, and that's absolutely fine. So we have no exclusivity, we're very transparent, and it's very flexible. Crucially, it's a long-term solution. We don't come in this, build a building, and then say we're going to sell our interest in 5 years' time, realise a profit and go. Again, we don't do that. We will be in this, our relationship with Lancashire is for 15 years with a further extension of 3 years if we both agree, and beyond that if we both want to. These are long-term partnerships because you get benefit from long-term gain. We've badged this as a STEP. The reason it's a STEP is it's Services Targeted Estates Partnership. The services bit is really important because the only way you get something from this is if your services are enhanced as a consequence. So it is about focusing on what you want to do in terms of delivering care. What we do is provide the environment with you to enable you to deliver that care. So if it doesn't work for you, it certainly doesn't work for us. Somebody downstairs came to me and said, well, this is just PFI. It's not PFI. This is not PFI. We've run PFIs. We've run 16 PFI schemes. This is not a PFI job. The reason it's not is because on this quick table, PFI certainly isn't a partnership of equals, nor is LIFT for that matter. The strategic partners in the other funding routes, procurement routes, don't have the same aims at all. There are increased costs with the other procurement routes. There are decreased costs in ours. As you will know, PFI and LIFT schemes are extremely complex in terms of the contractual basis. I heard the previous speaker talk about PFI contracts totaling hundreds and hundreds of pages. The schemes are not versatile. Again, we're seeing now news that says the reason why some NHS trusts are in difficulty is because of the fact they're locked into long-term PFI deals. That wouldn't be the case here. There are value for money concerns. How much does it cost to change a light bulb, etc. We've all read that sort of stuff. We save money. We guarantee to save money in these jobs. We deliver this together as an integrated partnership. There's no exclusivity, which there is in the other routes. We can manage that whole asset base for you or with you, or you can put people in to manage it and we will help them. It's that flexible. And I think the NHS perception of other routes, currently PFI perception is pretty poor. NHS LIFT is mixed depending on whether you have a good relationship with your LIFT partner or not. We haven't had much of a perception yet, apart from what you'll hear from Alistair, and I hope, at least it was earlier, it was reasonably positive. So what does it look like? What's the feature? That looks terribly complicated. It isn't really. If you start from the top, the Trust and Ryhurst come together, they form a joint venture company. That company is a limited liability partnership, which has tax benefits to both parties. We've called ours with Lancashire Red Rose Corporate Services because of the geography. Both parties put equity in. We'll put cash in. The Trust often will put land in to the deal. We create a company that can act as a funding company for a new build if that's what's required. And in Lancashire's case, we were asked to try and help them with funding totaling well over £100 million for new developments. The Trust takes a lease to occupy those buildings, and then the joint venture partnership procures the FM contractor, the building contractor, or whatever. We fund it by the joint venture company going to the market to get capital funding if that's what's required, and that funding is secured against the income that the Trust is paying in its lease. It's a very simple model, and it's one which, as I say, has found a lot of interest now within the NHS. The first in the country is ours. There are two others that I'm aware of, one that we're shortlisted to 2 on, and one which was a property deal based up in the north. The off-balance sheet position can be possible depending on the changes to financial rules over the next couple of years, but at the moment we could sit some of these deals off balance sheet if that was helpful to you as well. And we take the risk, if that's what's required, on developing and operating the assets. And what does that mean? It means if you say, can you take this forward under a GMP, a guaranteed maximum price, to get this building finished or to provide this service at a guaranteed cost, we will take the risk of that. We will tell you what we'll charge you for doing that. We'll negotiate that through, and all the risk then is ours if that's what you ask us to do. Alternatively, you may say, no, we've got people we want to put into this to do that job. Can you simply work with them? That's absolutely fine too, and we'll just work it that way. But what it does do is allow the Trust to participate in the decision-making and success of the project, which hasn't always been the case in other schemes. I'm going to pass over to Alistair now, who'll talk to you about what it's been like for Lancashire, and then we'll wrap up at the end with a summary and a few questions.
Hello. As Stephen was saying, this is the first NHS joint venture of its type in the country. I think really important at the core of this service, it's a 50-50 partnership. So Lancashire Care NHS Trust are half of this and own half of this, both the risks and the reward of that, and our partners Ryhurst the same. So each time we do a particular business transaction, we all go into that knowingly. We know what the upside and downside benefits and risks are for each proposition. As Stephen's touched on, these are non-exclusive, unlike some of the lift or previous contracts. Each time there's a business proposition, if it makes sense to do it through the joint venture, we, the Trust, will. If we want to do it separately, say it's an IM&T or some other back office function, we can make a decision not to use the joint venture. So it's whatever makes sense at the right time per business opportunity. So what's it really about? From our point of view as the NHS, it's about service improvements. We've got, as the Mental Health Trust, we had about 120 buildings, and through Transforming Community Services, where the PCTs have come into the Trust, we now operate from 400 sites across Lancashire. So we've got a big organisation, quite a complicated organisation, lots of buildings in a real mixture of condition. So our intention is to spend less money, if you like, fixing broken buildings, and more money fixing people. The intention we get then, through the efficiency gains, we can start rationalising our estate, improving our estate, and redeveloping our estate. Well, we've been doing that as the NHS for many years. And there's documents like Estate Code. They've been talking about how you do that as the NHS. You know, those documents have been out for many, many years as well. This isn't, as a concept, anything new. So what do these guys add? They add access to capital. They also allow us to increase the pace of change, and that's very important in the current market. We can do this quicker, which means we bring in savings quicker, which means that we can invest and improve our estate quicker, which means, as a consequence, we are improving the care we provide our patients at a quicker level. So, more cost effective, better treatment for patients, money saved to spend on patient care rather than fixing roofs and wiring and sort of infrastructure. So, Stephen's touched on our capital programme. There's over £100 million. At the moment, it's clocking about £150 million of capital investment over a programme over a number of years. Now, we've been at this as the NHS for some time, and we've got a scheme going forwards in Blackpool that's due to start on site next spring. That's about £70 million capital expenditure. It's a new NHS inpatient facility, allows us to shut and dispose of 3 other ones. So we can start to rationalise our estate into newer, improved buildings at a lower base cost, but better quality accommodation. The new accommodation we're doing, single bedroom, ensuite, nice garden, sufficient parking, all the things that we all want as the NHS and seem to struggle to get. Lessons learnt I've got here. I think a key lesson for a partnership, this will need to go through some sort of OJU process. They're quite complicated projects. It allows a number of iterative conversations because we found, as we moved into this, we learnt better about what it was we wanted. Because at a trust board and in the senior management team, there are different aspirations or expectations, and it allowed those to condense together to the point where we knew exactly what we wanted. By that time, we had a short list of organisations, and the successful organisation for us was Ryhurst. Our future plans, I've touched on, there's IMNT. Do we do an IMNT? There's also things around a propco. We've got a huge estate now. Do we put that into a propco? I'll talk about that in just a moment. So, why were Ryhurst selected? When we went through the selection, you get the commercial reality of what does it cost. That's fine, that's like any tender process. The other thing, though, that's really important, certainly to the NHS, is the values. And those of us in the NHS, we all know the values of the NHS is around care, productivity, patient provision, efficiency. And it's making sure that the partner we chose matched or had the aspirations to match those similar values. At the same time, there's the commercial reality about costs and about how you drive this forwards. But then we were able to achieve some of our values at a quicker pace because we had the ability to bring in additional sources of capital. We're not capital constrained as long as each business proposition stands up in its own right. And to be frank, if it doesn't, why are we doing any business proposition? So, value for money I've touched on. There are a range of assessments we took through the value for money. We took the internal team, internal audit. We also brought in the district valuer services. They are a government type of valuation organisation. They took a look at this both at a regional and a national level. So the national DVS and the regional DVS had a look at what we're doing. Because we're the first, how do we know this was a good proposition? And they've came back and they've confirmed, yes, what you're talking about at the moment looks like it's on the right track. Again, each one is business dependent. For Ryhurst, again, they've done LIFT, they've done PFI. They had a track record of working with the NHS. So again, we could talk to people who've used Ryhurst before, we could get some references and get a general sense of, okay, this is new, but is their approach right? And we were quite satisfied with that. And again, as Stephen's mentioned, he's a former chief executive. There's a number of staff in Ryhurst who have NHS track records. And that's important because they're going to be interfacing with us. They have been interfacing with us as the NHS. Operationally, it delivers a collaborative approach. So this really is, if you like, a marriage. This isn't replacing what we do and the staff we've got. It's adding to that. If we've got certain expertises, well, we don't need those from Ryhurst, but we do need these things. And so they can bring in that additional match so that we can start doing things more efficiently or quicker. It's a commercially focused approach, but then we've been trying to get to a commercially focused approach in the NHS for many years. So this isn't, again, anything new, but it's an additional level of skill. Again, when we're doing the capital work, if you need a funding competition, the NHS is terrible at doing funding competitions. Organisations such as this are very good at that. So you can bring in funders from a range of organisations that we would struggle to get hold of within the NHS, just as the NHS. Space utilisation we've looked at, and again, they've got some expertise within their organisation. Our back office and overhead accommodation, we've rationalised about 35% of that. That's a huge saving. There's some big, big wins there. That means people need to work differently, need to be a little bit less precious about having an office. I've lost my office. You sort of recognise that you need to work differently, but as a core, you're focusing on clinical service delivery. So if you need an office and you have to have an office, fine. If you don't have one. You have an office space to work in. It might be open plan or working in a team approach, or you go into an agile and anchor type of arrangement. Back to the core around this, it allows us to start making savings. Those savings we either need to make and achieve as a trust because they're demanded by our commissioners, but also they're savings we need to make as a trust anyway that we can invest in clinical services. And that's our core business. That's the NHS looking after people who are ill. Environmental performance we've been able to improve. Again, when we start to invest in our assets, you've got better energy efficiency, you've got a lower carbon footprint. Your running costs per square metre become lower. So again, your revenue costs for the asset you're using, both cheaper because you're using buildings differently and more intensively. Those buildings are in a better condition that have a lower running cost. So the initial efficiency drive, Ryhurst have been working with us on that since November of last year. And we've done an intensive piece of work around our hard and soft FM. In common parlance, hard FM's maintenance and soft FM's portering and catering and those sorts of things. They've got some big savings. We've achieved £1.5 million odd per year. Now that doesn't mean, okay, well you've just cheapened the lot and got rid of a bunch of people. Not at all. We've looked at the contracts we had, the outsourced contracts we've had. Do we bring some of those back in-house? Do you manage them differently, which free up some of the manager's time to do other things? So we've had a big win on E&FM services. We had, if you like, a gold quality cost and a bronze level service, and we've got the complete inverse of that now, where we've got a gold quality service at a bronze level cost. And we can evidence that. We used to get in regular complaints of E&FM services. They didn't like the food, couldn't park, roofs leaking, poor quality service, response levels were poor. And that's because of poor investment or poor quality buildings. That's more or less dried up on the services that are running under the new contracts, and we now get compliments. We've never, ever had compliments. We now get compliments on the service we provide. So the clinicians are happy and the patients are happy by the service. It's costing us less. Well, where's the sense not to do that? Our third-party costs in estates and facilities around consultants we used, we've made a 50% saving. So some of those are about framework renegotiations. You can do that anyway. But also we looked at, because we had this partnership approach, what skills can they bring in? So rather than use tenders for consultant service, they could bring in consultants. We knew what we're getting, and the cost of that are very efficient. Again, because we've freed up some of the internal management time, because we're running our estates and facilities contracts in a different way, some of the estates and facilities staff can start to do work in a different way they didn't have the time to do before. So we can spend less time with consultants because we're working with different people or working with the same people internally in a different way. There's a bit of training there needed. We had an innovation fund through some of our contracts, and that allowed us to generate a small surplus. We've invested in enhanced service provision. On one of our larger sites, we've created a biodiesel plant. So we recycle all of our chip fat and any of the sort of associated cooking oils. That allows us to run all of our internal fleet on that site now from biodiesel. So again, that helps on the carbon footprint and those sorts of things. But actually, instead of paying to get rid of cooking fat, we now use it as diesel. So there's a real win there, paid for from the innovation fund. So it didn't cost us anything to do it, and we get an immediate win. Structurally, this separates clinical service delivery from estates so that we can focus as the trust on our clinical service. That's the core of what we do, as I said a moment ago. It makes sure, though, there is a focus on estates. We've got a partner to bring in either additional resource or some further support we need to do to move things forwards quicker in a tighter way. The NHS is expert in what it does. It's not expert necessarily as a property developer. So again, when we're working doing property development, we've got access to people who are expert in the things that we might do on an occasional basis. There's a shared accountability and an equitable approach to risk and reward. We are 50% of this joint venture. So it's not as if some cold-hearted consultants coming in and taking money away, as is the perception in the media. This isn't PFI. We've got PFI. We've got 3 PFIs. This is very, very different to PFI. I can absolutely assure that. And it brings in access to new capital, both pension funds and banks. And these aren't just private sector pension funds. We've got 2 local authority pension funds we were talking to. One of those approached us. So there is money out there to invest, and it's about whether it's public pension fund, private sector bank, or we can still use the NHS finance facility if we so want to. Again, as I said, all of these deals are non-exclusive. It makes whatever makes most sense to the NHS. So, for yourselves, for the NHS as a whole, what could the partnership become? It's an effective commercial partnership. We're all needing to become more commercial. Whatever happens to the health bill, what is absolutely certain, the NHS has to become more commercially focused. So the organisations that will be stronger through this are the ones that become more commercially focused quicker, because ultimately that's where it's going. If you don't become, there's plenty of private care providers out there that are in conversations with the commissioners, and that market's going to go. So as the NHS, we think we're very good at providing good quality healthcare. We want to remain providing that good quality healthcare. We're not so good as developers, doesn't matter. With a partnership, you can get both of those. So we have a partner of estates and related services, but you can do things with other organisations. We're in conversation at Red Rose with other public sector organisations in the area and other NHS trusts who are within our Lancashire catchment or on our periphery about whether we can help them with their developments or some of the support around their estates and facilities management services. It allows us, again, with a joint venture, to invest in and manage other estates. And I talked about PropCo a moment ago, just in a very tight position. A PropCo is, if you like, a cooperative of organisations that can bring their estates into a single entity. So you could have some PCTs that bring in their assets, you can have some GPs that bring in their assets, and you run it in an open book and transparent way where the PropCo in its own rights can rationalise, it can develop its own estate, and that's owned on a shareholding basis. So the commissioners always have access to the accommodation they want to commission. It's run to NHS standards, to a good cost, and it's done in a very professional way, but at the same time you can start to achieve your QUIP agendas and the things that you need to achieve within the NHS anyway. So I'll pass now back to Stephen.
Thanks, Alistair. Just to finish up, then 2 slides for you. First of all, how can Ryhurst contribute to driving out these inefficiencies, that should say, rather than efficiencies, or driving out efficiencies for you? Firstly, we need to focus on the fact that this is all about improving services. Yes, we make a profit, of course we do. Yes, we take a fee, of course we do. We're a commercial company. But you will know that fee, you will see it, you will agree it, you will work with us to see that we're delivering it against a set of KPIs that work for you. This is about improving services for the NHS. We only work with the NHS, and if it doesn't work, as I said earlier, for you, then it certainly doesn't for us. We bring that commercial expertise to the table. You've heard some of that from Alistair. When I worked in the NHS, I really wish I knew then what I know now about the way some of these opportunities can be taken forward. I would be a damn sight better chief executive if I'd been aware of what I know now. There are good commercial partners out there who can help you deliver, and we think by bringing that commercial expertise to the table, it can certainly help the NHS. And I think from the response we've had across a number of these discussions and from people who've approached us, I think the NHS realises too that finding a good partner will work. Alistair indicated that one of the challenges is securing funding, not only for development. You might think, well, I haven't got a big capital development to do. It's not only about that. The NHS has an enormous chain of backlog maintenance, for example, £4 billion worth of backlog maintenance sitting there, £4 billion of works that should have been done that haven't been done. And each year you account for that and spend money on that. One of the ways of dealing with that very simply is to buy it out, is to take it from you, take the responsibility for delivery for you, give you the capital receipt, you just simply pay an annual charge back, and then the thing is cleared, and you get much more benefit and we think, much better estate management as a consequence. And that might be just by using your own estate team, but managing them differently. We embedded somebody into the Lancashire Care Trust from our team who had a different approach and was able to help drive out some of the savings that Alistair's talked about. And by identifying those opportunities to reduce estates and facilities management costs, in turn it allows reinvestment in improving services, and back we go round again. So, quick summary of those key benefits. Rapid delivery of efficiency savings for you. We've guaranteed that we will scope potential opportunities in the first 4 weeks of any partnership. That will be fully worked through in 3 months, and we'll be delivering that in less than a year. Now, you will get companies, I won't name them, but companies who will come to you and say, we will guarantee you a saving of X pounds based on your revenue turnover per annum. Just have a look at what you're being offered when that happens. You're getting a 5% saving against your revenue budget. They have to recover that 5%. They have to make a profit. they then need to have money for reinvestment to give you that back next time. The true cost to you is something like 20%. So this is different. This says, between us, we form this company, we'll find these savings, we guarantee it. And we'll take our fee, you keep the rest. It's joint. It's a partnership. It's not a contractor supplier. It's not outsourcing. It's creating a partnership, a joint venture partnership. It's called a joint venture partnership for a reason. We share that risk and reward. We have 50-50 responsibility for delivery and risk of failure. Understand that, of course. But it's about making sure it works. If we bring people to the table, if we say to you, we will find you savings in car parking or energy or whatever, then I think somebody asked the question of the previous speaker about, he's gone now, but he asked about outsourcing and owed you and all the rest of it. And do private companies have to owe you? No, private companies don't have to owe you. But what we believe is that because we're working with the NHS, we should at the very least validate whatever we're offering through benchmarking and by market testing. And so again, we will show you a range of choices so that those savings are ones you feel comfortable with. And crucially, it's linked to whatever service plans and estate strategies you've got. There's no point us doing it if it isn't about achieving your goals. None at all. So we work with you, you tell us what the estate plans are, what are you trying to achieve? More care in hospital, more care outside hospital, the rationalisation of mental health estate, fewer primary care centres, more GP premises, whatever it is. And then we gear up the solution to meet those service needs. So that's what we're about. Our partnership, we think, is working well. Our contact details are there. We've got a stand downstairs, and I think in your packs this morning you had a leaflet about Ryhurst as well. Alistair and myself will be happy to have a chat now. If you have a question, can you just pop your hand up, and then the microphone will come your way so that it can be picked up for the DVD that you're all being filmed on, apparently, for later on. So, okay, thanks very much. Are there any questions?
One of the challenges from the presentations, speakers this morning, was the need to be seen to integrate services. I note that the model that's been put up is really with Lancashire Care and Ryhurst. How does that model address that need to integrate services across not only one trust, but primary care, acute, mental health trust, and local authorities as well, because that seems to be the driver at the moment for us?
It's a really good question, thank you. We did a session yesterday with just down the road in the Barbican with a local authority audience. And now we hadn't talked to them before, but as Red Rose, we did that because we think and we know that the local authority world is also interested in doing this and possibly piggybacking or joining into those joint venture opportunities that we've talked about. And so the short answer to your question is, if you take somewhere like Herefordshire, by looking at their health and local authority estate, over 10 years, they've been talking to partners and aim to save something like £33 million over that time by using that estate more productively. The Labour government had a concept called Total Place, which was about using estates in a way that local communities could benefit from collectively. And that, that title has changed, but the principle is sound. Can you use your public estate more productively than you currently do? And the answer, of course, is yes. We can add in a local authority partner or a third sector partner into this joint venture. It might then not be 50-50, it might then be 33-33, or it might be that the NHS takes 50% and we continue to take the risk on 50%. It's that flexible, you can change it in those ways. If we can find, and I think I'm going to give you an example, in the West Midlands, in Solihull, we're there in a joint venture partnership. You've got Solihull Metropolitan Borough Council, you've got the local NHS and ourselves, and we are creating space there which covers the total needs of those local residents, whether it's in education, health, retail, commerce, social needs, and it can be that flexible to make those needs work. The structure is able to accommodate that sort of benefit.
Hi, question for Alistair, please. And this might sound a little flippant, and I'm not intending it to be at all, but you're a foundation trust. You could just borrow money from the foundation trust financing facility at competitive rates. I'm interested in your thought process that you went through as an organisation that brought you to the conclusion you needed a partner. That was kind of the first part of the question. And then the second thing for me is kind of, and it may be the same thing really, but what was the kind of one thing that really nailed you to this as a solution? You know, what was the real big selling point that caused you to think that this is the way forward for you?
Well, no, I don't think that's a flippant question at all. We were moving on. We had a £150 million capital programme. It was over 10 years. We had an agreed strategic outline case signed off by the Strategic Health Authority. We had all of the local buy-in from MPs and the whole of Lancashire. This is a big Lancashire capital programme. And we were going ahead on the presumption that the NHS finance facility was fully funded and capable to spend as much as it wanted whenever we wanted that available. We also thought, it was a conversation I had with our Director of Finance, well, what if we get there and the money's restrained? We needed a plan B. So we thought, well, what would a plan B look like? We need money. What else are we short of at the same time in the trust? Well, we had a very, very small estates and facilities management professional team. And as those of you know, there's not been 20 years of recruitment and training in estates facilities. The numbers get smaller and smaller by the year as people retire off. So there's a declining pool of expertise at the time when we are going into overdrive to start to do things and change the organisation. So we need some expertise on tap. We might need money. We might need a few things. And what does that look like? And we started to form the joint venture approach. We had a conversation with Monitor because we were an FT. They said, fine, carry on, just keep us plugged in as and when you go forwards at various hurdles. So we took it forwards in this iterative way. It took us about 18 months because no one else had done it. There was no rule book, there was no guidance, there was no one to talk to. So we had to basically do various workshops to work out what we wanted internally at a trust board and senior management level to then move forwards into the next step. As far as the thing that really nailed it, the thing that really nailed it for us is as we went through this competitive dialogue process, it became quite apparent that there's not just Ryhurst in the market doing this, but the joint venture approach really allowed us to accelerate what we needed to do as the trust. Suddenly, the things that we wanted to do, we were planning, well, we can't do that for 8 years, metering out this money over so-and-so, we save your surpluses. Well, that's not a problem anymore because the capital's not the issue. Access to capital is not the issue as long as each business proposition is financially sound. And as I said in my talk, if it's not financially sound, why are you doing it anyway? If it's financially sound, there's nothing to stop you doing it now. So we could start to actually then improve our patient care because we could start sorting out all these legacy things that we had. Some of them were 20 years buildings with no proper view on them or investment because they'd been at the bottom of the pile because cardiac or cancer care or whatever in the organisation that was looking after mental health at that time had a focus on. So we'd inherited a lot of legacy estate in bad condition that we were in the process of sorting it. We could only do it at a certain pace. With a joint venture approach, we could do that much quicker, and we are. Does that answer all your questions there? Okay, thank you.
I think we're coming up to time, so anybody last questions? Okay, well, thank you very much for being here, and I hope we've answered your questions. Thank you.